we've got everyone who's going to. We have not only a quorum, but we have everyone that's going to join us this evening. So Francine is not going to be able to join us. Something did come up, and she was kind enough to inform me in advance. I've asked Corey to take minutes. He's kindly agreed. So why don't we go ahead and get started with a roll call attendance. Ralph Dormitzer.
Ralph Dormitzer here.
Great. Mike Dick.
Mike Dick here.
Susan Franklin.
Susan Franklin here.
Corey Evans.
Corey Evans here, and for the purpose of minutes, is Mr. Dormitzer a voting member today?
Yes, that is true.
Okay, just confirming.
And Brian Host here. So we've got 5 participants online today, and as Corey pointed out, our associate member is a voting member for this evening. Although I'm not sure we have any votes on the agenda, but just in case. So the first item is to turn this over to Brian Joyce to walk us through the roads and sidewalks plan for the upcoming year. And I know there were a bunch of emails just asking for supplemental data, which Brian's been kind enough to gather and forward. But I'll just turn it over to Brian. Walk us through what the game plan is, Mr. Joyce.
Yes, thank you. Good evening or afternoon still. So I'll preface this by saying we are meeting with the roads. There's a sidewalk and roads committee chaired by Justin Pipare, and there are several other members on it. And they're going through kind of the process of evaluating sections of town, and their task is to come before the select board, hopefully sometime soon, with a recommendation of roads and sidewalk projects. That said, what I've presented is kind of what I presented to them and what I think they'll adopt for this year's road program. And I guess their charge is more advisory, but I just want to put that out there that if anything we talk about tonight is not on there, like some, a bridge sidewalk props up somewhere in discussion, it's because of this committee, which will be presenting for the select board at some time, hopefully in the near future. So that said, this year's paving projects include South Main Street from Street by St. Anthony's, that intersection all the way to the Situate line. And included in that is overlay of the existing sidewalk, and where it transitions to roadways will include handicap strips and the necessary ADA requirements. Also, we have Beechwood Street from Mill Lane to Kendall Village, which is that property development just kind of across the driveway from Shaw's entrance on Beechwood. That also includes the overlay of the sidewalk and ADA transitions. Mill Lane, which is a side street off of Beechwood Street, has been on the list for several years. That's scheduled to be done along with that. We have Pond Street from Route 3A to 100 Pond. That also includes sidewalk overlay and ADA transitions. And then we're planning to crack seal various roads that we're compiling the list for now, and that basically extends the longevity of roads multiple years beyond. If you don't do the crack sealing, you get water intrusion, and it just breaks up even more between years like 10 and 20. So that's kind of what we have this year. Our funding, I noted earlier, is we have Chapter 90 money. The balance is sorry, I'm trying to find it.
533,064 was in the email.
Yes, thank you. So 533, that includes the New Year's appropriation. So we're planning to make that project request to DOT. They, as long as it's a public road, they don't, and you're using a certified contractor, there's no reason for them to reject it. But we'll submit that for South Main Street, and then we have a little bit of grid money left, and then the new roadway fund would do the remainder. So our total I guess, cost liability for this year's work is about 1.36 million. And again, these are all estimates. I'll say there's usually things come up, and I do anticipate some more things to come up on South Main Street with that sidewalk work. There's a lot of, if you walk it, you'll see root intrusion on the sidewalk where I think we're probably going to have to go in with an excavator and, remove pieces of it and then take out maybe a little bit of the root system, which is just extra work before we do that overlay. So I guess with that, I'll take any questions or comments. And I did get your emails earlier looking for the kind of historical background on our road funds. We have expended all capital budget road funds from the past with this past year, but the intent of the roadway fund, I think, is to take the liability off of the capital budget fund. Even though you guys will go through it each year, I think it's a separate fund that's just for roads, because it's the single biggest, I guess, capital cost we have year over year as a town.
Brian, you're muted. Brian Host.
Thank you. I just had one quick question regarding the Chapter 90 balance in here in your email at 533, and it says that it says with new year. So what does that mean? What is the balance prior to June 30, and what is the appropriation that you're expecting to come in, and what will the total be sort of once we cross that June 30 threshold into the new fiscal year?
So our latest grant was 223,805.95.
That's the balance, Brian.
No, that was the last year's Chapter 90
Okay.
appropriation.
Yeah.
Prior to that, we had used the entire balance of the Chapter 90 fund we had on Sawyer Street, but halfway through the project, we were awarded a complete streets grant for the sidewalk portion. Okay. So we requested to take that out of our original authorization from them. So then they refunded that 197,400 into the fund. So
okay, so that left a bit in our Chapter 90 funds. Right. Okay, so we're sitting on, sorry, you said 225-ish?
No, we're sitting on, I'm working off my laptop. Let me grab the actual sheet from them.
Brian, I see 533,064 Chapter 90 balance.
Yes, but that's with the new year. So I think, and that's what I'm trying to get clarified, Mike, is how much is in there now and how much are we anticipating to come in fiscal 25? And is the 533 with the fiscal 25 Chapter 90 grant or funds, or is it not? I'm just
so this current paving season, our unexpended contract balance, this is from DOT as of Friday, is 533,060.
Oh, so we have 533 now.
Right now, yeah, for project requests, correct.
So we have 533 right now, and then we're going to get more Chapter 90 funds in fiscal 25.
So when you say fiscal 25, it'll be next paving season, or not. We wouldn't have it for this paving season.
Right. Okay, but it would be effectively back in the fund at this time next year. So correct. After this, okay, I'm just trying to understand how much is coming in and how much is
yeah. So I mean, if you want to quantify roughly what might come in with the new millionaires tax, I've been told it's our usual 210 to 220,000 is probably going to be another 100,000, so maybe 300,000. Okay.
So we might see 200 to 350, somewhere in that range will come in. Okay. Yeah. So we're sitting on, okay. That's what all I was trying to understand is what are we sitting on today? What will come in, after the beginning of the fiscal new year? I hear you. It's not available for this paving season. So that'll be sitting in the fund at this time next year. Okay. I've got clarity on what I was looking for. I don't know if that helped anyone else. It may have opened other questions.
I have a follow-up question.
Sure.
And Brian, could you explain to me what grid funding remaining?
So yeah, this is
Is-
the balance. So National Grid, we negotiated them to give us money in lieu of paving their trenches. That we would take over paving those roadways if they gave us, you know, a negotiated fee. And we had to use some of it last year for the public safety facility. So when we were doing Elm Street, we paved also up and around the public safety facility because the chief was saying the engines were really getting banged up going in and out of there. So it's all new paving around that area. And the
So
remainder of that is we're going to use it as well on this year's paving.
Right, so I added the 143 to the 533 and came up with 676,064.
Yep.
That's available now. And then I also see 800,000 available now with ATM appropriation to bring us to
Yes.
1.476.
Right, so that should get us where we need to for this current year. But it's
Right.
I just mentioned the other fund because this is the first year we're doing this kind of fund, and to be honest, I don't even know
I see.
what town meeting vote. I know we need to have an article for town meeting to allow us to expend the funds out of this
Right.
fund. So I don't know if that's coming from this committee or if it's going to come from the town manager or me, so I think that's something that we need to figure out. But basically, we'll be asking for that.
So with the 1.476 million, assuming that we can do the mechanics, the process to get the 800,000 that was approved at the fall town meeting, that shows that we can cover your 1.36. Is that correct?
That's accurate.
Okay,
right.
so the only assumption in there is that we can release the 800,000 with the proper town meeting warrant articles.
Correct.
Okay, just one other note, for the Sawyer Street sidewalks, is there any money left from Avalon on that?
No, that was fully expended.
Okay, and that project's done and wrapped.
That's wrapped, done, and it was, I think we may have talked about it last year. It was significantly, I don't want to call it over budget, but it was a significant cost because we were required to do impermeable paving out there and under drains. So it was a Concom permitting requirement. So that entire sidewalk from Stop and Shop up to past the Cook Estates is impermeable pavement, and 2 feet below that there's a catchment pipe that goes the entire length of it, 2 pipes, and they go into the catch basin system, and there's a storm scepter. So all of that extra cost took all that Avalon money.
I have a couple more questions, but like to hear from anybody else that might have questions.
Yeah, just a quick clarification. Do I recall that the way the stabilization funds worked is that the select board has authority to authorize as much as or as little as they want? Based on that conversation many of us had with the state on those questions, that it simply says select board, they just need to say they intend to appropriate 800,000 out of the stabilization fund in order for it to be active without necessarily going to the town meeting. That's my understanding of it. So
It's more than my understanding. Thanks, Ralph.
Yeah, we'll let somebody else figure out the mechanism because spent enough time on that.
We did spend a lot of time on it, so much so that my brain's fried. Ralph, I mean, we're gonna need clarity on it. I actually remembered it a little differently, but I'm totally capable of having it wrong.
We raised them, but we have to. Ralph's right. You have to appropriate them before we can spend them.
Yeah,
So we have to
that
put them in
that part we're all on the same page. My perception was that to appropriate, the appropriations are standard process. It requires more than just the select board to say we're going to appropriate. So
Correct.
my
You have to
understanding is
do
to appropriate out of that fund or any of the special purpose funds has to
At
come
the
in,
town
you know,
meeting.
it's standard. It has to go in front of capital select board and advisory committee, and we provide recommendations to town meeting. It's the way I remember it. It may not be right, Ralph.
Me too. Brian, do we can you give us any clarity on what is coming up next cycle? I did have a quick chat with Justin about kind of priorities and just kind of bigger picture stuff. And, you know, part of the understanding of, I don't disagree that all this stuff, the roads that you've got identified here are all a mess. So, but what's kind of next coming up? Obviously, because we've heard there's other things that want to get paved and want to be sidewalked, and we just getting a handle on what's coming next down the pipeline may help a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah, we have the hillsides, and obviously there's a lot of discussion on which is the higher priority at this other committee, but we have the hillside roads, Norfolk, and kind of
Hillside roads are a mess. Yeah.
Norfolk, Bancroft, Short Street is a big one. Even though it's pretty short, but it requires
Pretty short. Yeah. Ash and Oak are probably what is it? Oak is a mess at top. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so those are on there. We have Beechwood on the east side, and there may be a sidewalk recommendation over there for addition between where Beechwood, it looks like it's Beechwood, but it transitions to Norman Todd Road for a section. There's no sidewalk connectivity there. We have Doane Street on the park side going towards the state park.
Yeah.
Pond Street towards from 3A towards the pond. There's a request to also put a sidewalk in there for connectivity with the schools. And
Yeah,
road
saw that.
too.
Okay.
So I think the list that's going to come from this committee is more of a forward-looking list for next year, not what we're looking at this year. I think this is pretty, but I think there will also be additional, sidewalks where there aren't sidewalks, and that's cost plus when you're adding a sidewalk where there never was a sidewalk. You're moving utility poles. You do survey engineering and so I anticipate we'll be appropriating the 800 each year is my anticipation.
Okay. And sorry, go on.
I was just gonna say, I like that we have a group of people that is doing the prioritization. I mean, that's kind of what we talk about here all the time is, well, at least give us a rubric. And I'm glad that we have somebody doing that. I think one thing that is in my mind is connected to what we talked about last week. Brian, you weren't here, but the paving and the sidewalk at the schools, and how is that a priority versus other school projects versus other road projects? And I think there's a little bit of awkwardness about what bucket that should fit in when it comes to all the other priority 1A things that we're dealing with. So part of my understanding, or trying to understand at least the money of forward looking here is, is there a way where we can, not make huge sacrifices if we can, massage stuff into schedules and without having to take it, without taking on unnecessary risk.
Yeah, no, and that's a good segue. I brought up the schools. I also got the quotes of the 2 school campuses.
Over $1 million. Yeah.
Can we circle back to? I do want to go through the quotes on the 2 school campuses, but I'd love to finish the town stuff first before we flip over.
Yeah, okay. I have some additional questions on the roadway program.
Please.
If we can pick that up again.
Yes, Michael, please proceed.
Yeah, I see in the TL Edwards quotes that there's significant money that is going to be required for what's excluded. So police details, tree trimming, ADA compliance, and many other things there. Typically, where does that money come from on other paving projects?
That comes from these funds as well, right? So if that's why I said these are estimates, but I think there's a chance if there's a lot more excavation of root intrusion or tree trimming. If there's tree trimming, we usually go in with DPW crews and trim it up. If it's a lot of excavation of the sidewalk, we may have a third-party contractor, or have Edwards, do it as an extra on their contract. But all that, paying for all that comes from the road funds. So I think,
can you-
in going for the 1.4 with this 1.3 estimate, I think it should cover extras unless we have like a real big thing that comes up we don't anticipate.
Okay, because for that number of projects, four, 100,000 doesn't seem like a lot, particularly, with police details and many other things in there. But do you have a rule of thumb that you use for, like, how many linear feet, or
I gotta tell you, the big
size of the
things
project?
the big things that come up, especially on South Main Street, Elm Street was big, is the details are significant. If you have two-way traffic and 2 or 3 police details a day, it adds up to, tens of thousands of dollars. And it's not just, can we ask Cohasset Police? We're paying, like any contractor, a detail rate, and it's usually Norfolk County, or it could be Hingham, it could be whoever can fill those details. So we're paying invoices to any of those police areas. The other thing not included in here is line striping. That's a different consortium contract. Again, it's not as big a ticket item, but it's it's in the tens of thousands. So I
Do you
think
have a rule of thumb to apply for a project for these costs that are outside of the paving work?
So the rule of thumb is kind of what I had in the second column there, and I did include it in the 1.3. I had police details with just an estimate of, kind of a rough time frame of how many weeks we're going to have 2 police details, just times the daily rate. So that's included in that second column.
Which
and
column?
Sorry, I sent as part of the roadway program 2024. There's the estimate from TL Edwards in the first column, and then there's incidentals.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And then they add up to the third column there.
I see. Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. That's exactly what I was looking for. Thanks.
But again, that incidentals doesn't include, hey, we just found a drain that's broken in the middle of the street, we need to get in. And so those things come up, but hopefully not as much.
On the Beechwood section to Mill Lane, that's from 3A to Mill Lane. Just for clarity, so there's a bunch of sections there, especially as it goes by Ox Pasture, where the sidewalk, that's not a sidewalk, right? I mean, it's maybe 12 inches wide. It's a blind corner. This says overlay existing. Does that mean it's only what's existing, or are these becoming actual with sidewalk? Because I think that's been a huge priority. Beechwood was talking to me as select board member all the time about this section, and I want to be sure we're taking advantage of this opportunity to fix it.
Yeah, so that width of the sidewalk there, I don't want to say it's kind of like a ocular. It's like an illusion when you go down. It's actually 4 feet of width, but there's a ledge outcropping right there across from, that's pretty significant and vertical, that looks like you're squished right up against the road. There is no curb. We intend to put in a curb that will delineate the sidewalk. Right now, it's just a painted fog line, and you do have 4 feet. I walked that entire stretch with the tape measure, and you have 4
Is
feet.
it really?
It is 4 feet. I tell you where
really?
Yeah, I know it looks. Okay. It looks like.
Well, because I run that every week, and it's like that part is like scary for one human, and so I guess I'm 4 feet wide, but like I'm incredulous here.
Yeah, it doesn't feel it, but the tape doesn't lie, and I know exactly the section. The place where we don't have ADA compliance is further down Beechwood Street. It's not part of this project, but when you're going down past Riverview towards the playground, and there's a hedge right there, that's only a couple of feet.
That part's
yeah, and that's so I think that's probably.
I don't want to put you on the spot, like, give us numbers, but would this be something where it'd be worth having a conversation with sidewalk and to say, what does it cost to do an ADA sidewalk there? I mean, consider it's so heavily traversed and we're doing it before we spend the money. We always talk about how it's better to do it as one project. Should we explore, or should we suggest we explore redoing that section properly before we go ahead and repave it?
So whenever we touch a sidewalk, which includes in this, we need to get ADA compliance. And that ADA compliance generally is 4 feet of travel with, you don't need a curb, but you need 4 feet travel, and you need ADA compliant transitions to intersections. You know, it's usually a concrete ramp with a tread mat that's got little raised bumps on it. So we're getting that treatment at the King Street intersection, at the Boundbrook Lane intersection, and we'll have 4 feet of width of the sidewalk going all the way down there. Where it's tight, like at that intersection where the granite is, we may end up putting kind of a bituminous Cape Cod berm there with an elevated sidewalk, so it's delineated better with the
Okay.
4 feet. But
So does a 4 feet, I'm sorry, my committee members for hashing on this topic. I go through this all the time and I know it's been a priority. This will be my last thing. So the 4 feet is from the line or from the edge? Because maybe I'm mathing from where there's kind of already like a ridge there to the end versus you're mathing from the line.
so
the
I
4 feet.
was mathing from kind of what the clear space is from the fog line to
From the fog. Okay.
yeah, the fog line is basically where your travel lane starts. And
Okay. Yeah. All right. So like this section that we're talking about, I mean, where the step down is, or where there's kind of that gap is kind of right in the middle. So that's where I remember where it's like I'm running with 1 foot on the sidewalk and then 1 foot on the road, or rolling my ankle basically, because it's right in the middle where I put my right foot running down that sidewalk. So, or someone in a stroller would have their outside wheel kind of running that edge. But it sounds like what you're saying is if we redo it properly, there will be 4 feet of level space for somebody to pass through.
on a sidewalk surface, right?
Okay.
And that's the requirement. We can't not do that.
Okay. All right. Thanks for educating me on that.
And just taking a step further, because we can't do that, there's a lot of sidewalks like Pleasant Street from the railroad tracks to Cushing Road that you really can't get 4 feet of sidewalk in there. So either you're taking yards or doing, so it's not as easy as just shifting. So those are in discussion, but it's a lot of those sidewalks that are really on the wish list. When we're an old colonial town, they weren't thinking, ADA and when they put these houses so tight to the street in some of the spots.
Right. You hear a pause, so I've got a few questions just to keep this going. So back to your email on the funding, Brian. Item number 4, you said the fiscal 25 is another 800,000. So that would give us 800,000 for next paving season, plus whatever Chapter 90 funds come in, which is, call it, 225 to 350, roughly speaking. So a little over $1 million, call it $1 million, to 1.1 ish. Will that roughly cover what is conceptually that a decent number for next year?
So in the next, by midsummer, we'll have priced out those other roads. It's going to be Edward's next contract. So
okay, so we have to see that. Okay, but I'm thinking about it the right way. That's what we'll have available for the next season is the 800 that is fiscal 25 plus the Chapter 90 funds is nothing else.
Yeah,
really.
that sounds fair, right?
Okay, and then in terms of National Grid, for some reason I had it in my head that National Grid was on the hook for Pond Street from the high school up to 3A. Is that not the case? Because it looks like that stretch of road's on your paving plan for this year.
Yes, so we negotiated a price. They gave us a check for 313,000. We had to use a portion of that 313,000 for around the police and fire station.
Okay.
So it was it wasn't, only for that sole use, but it was basically.
Okay, so this, but they cut us a check for quote unquote the damage to that road. And we have the ability to use it as we see fit. Is that pretty much how it works?
Yes.
Okay, and we used a chunk of it around the fire station. There's still some left. Okay.
And
that's-
not to say for the public that we're not paving, like that's our road. We're paving that road. It's just. a
We're still
matter
going to pave the road. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I get it. So that's item number 2 in your email, the grid funding that's remaining, the 143. Okay. All right, and then is there anything else that's on your program for this year where we'll be getting a reimbursement for grid? Did they not tear up South Main and some of these others?
No, they did basically the best part of South Main is their trench right now. So it's unfortunately. So they did what they did. So North Main Street, if you remember last year, that was like a hellhole. And now they did a grind and inlay of the entire lane of their trench, and now it's pretty good. So that's what they did on South Main a while ago. They don't owe us anything on it.
Okay. And in terms of South Main, are we doing anything with regards to sewer lines and water lines down? I mean, are there sewer and water to the Scituate border currently? And if not, are we putting them in? Like what's there? What's the plan?
It's been a discussion for almost as long as I've been here. And there is no current plan to sewer that area. It's just been discussion. There's been regional discussion. There's been just local discussion. And the road has just gotten worse and worse each year. It's been on our list to pave, 3 or 4 years ago. So it's at a point of, we need to pave it or, something bad's going to happen. So if there is in the future some project, that project will have to assume a curb to curb restoration of the roadway in its cost.
Yeah. That would clearly be some years away, even if the discussion were underway today. So given the time it takes to do sewer, even if it's just us and not regional.
Right. And that's unrelated, but kind of related. I had a meeting in Weymouth this morning with, so there is just, because you guys may hear about it, and I'll tell you right now, there's a regional, the group of communities on the South Shore are just doing a study of what it would take to connect to MWRA. It doesn't mean we're going to connect to MWRA, but basically kicking the tires of, should we connect to MWRA water, because they have opened up some capacity to the South Shore and North Shore, and they've waived their entrance fee, or I don't know if that's what it's called, but basically that's it until 2028. So anyway, we're part of this regional effort to just do a study to see what it would take and to connect them to MWRA, because there is some stuff on the radar for the water system where at some point we'll be looking at a treatment plan, and do we weigh the cost of a brand new treatment plant or getting water from
just by the water? Do they have the capacity to supply the entire town?
Our town? Yes. Yeah. They're I think they're releasing 50 million gallons a day to, South Shore, North Shore, and kind of the group of South Shore communities. I think it might be around 20 million gallons or something like that.
Oh,
we're
wow.
1.5 to 2, so we're pretty small. We are the smallest.
Then how close does their system come to us at this point?
It's in Blue Hills, Quincy. It's pretty far. So I mean, it's a big endeavor. I don't want to get in the weeds on it, but it's like, you're going to hear about it at some point, and so I'd rather have you hear from me, and there'll be some press release.
Yeah, we got into water by me asking about South Main, so I apologize. But whenever we do roads, it's important to ask about the water and sewer underneath too, because it sounds like we could possibly be revisiting this road in the well before it gets worn out. I guess I would say it's probably the best way to put it. We don't really have the ability to wait much longer, I guess. I don't have anything further on road sidewalks. How about other members of the committee?
Just a couple of questions, Brian. This year, when we looked at the increase in cost for asphalt, for example, for Edwards, it was like 30%, a really substantial number year from the previous year. Is there any chance that we'll see some less cost or that come down when they actually issue a new set of bids for the state? Is that in the works now, or where are we with that whole bidding process?
So we have one more year on their contract, which goes to January or February of next year. And then at that point, we'll have already started the bidding process as the MAPC is the consortium we're part of. And who's, so basically we're locked in our prices until that time, and the next bids, whatever the climate is on fuel and oil costs, I think will dictate where we'll be. But we're still at that elevated level right now.
And Brian, sorry, what's the vintage on that contract? You said we're in the last year of it. When was it put in place?
So this is year 2.
Oh,
It was
okay.
an extension year that everyone opted.
An extension. So when was the original contract put in place?
It was January of 23.
Okay.
Right? January 23 with January 24. Then we'll go to January 25. And then the goal is to have the bids done by winter time so that everyone's, it'll be awarded by April of 25 for whoever the new contract is. I mean, it's been TL Edwards forever. Unfortunately, they're kind of one of the big players or only players on the South Shore. So they usually get the bid.
So just extending on Rob's question, I've got two additional questions. I mean, one is that obviously there was a step function up in price, during the pandemic, when the price of oil, shot the moon, but it's back down. I was, trying to pull up some historical charts, but it's, West Texas at 82. I mean, it's seen that number multiple times over the past 10 years. It's not really an extraordinary number, high or low. So I would hope that, this would start to normalize at some point. I guess we'll see what comes in. Do we have the ability to benchmark their bids against, what's being bid, for example, up on the North Shore and other places to see if, their oligopolistic or perhaps monopolistic position here on the South Shore is yielding strange numbers in terms of the pricing?
They were lower than what DOT is paying for asphalt. And when we did that road study, that's probably a year and a half ago now. But they were better pricing than those. I don't know about other regional consortiums. That's a good question. I can check into. I think MAPC has several different regions. Maybe they.
Okay. I mean, the bid's the bid, but it's always nice to know what a reasonable benchmark is too, just so you understand whether your bid process is working. If there's just one bidder, it may or may not. I guess the second question I have is just looking at these bids, it's pretty clear. A huge portion of the cost is not, in fact, the materials itself, but excavation and all kinds of other things. I mean, you could pick any one of these bids and just go through the line items. There's a ton of stuff in here that's, a very significant percentage of each of these projects is not actually the asphalt. And I guess I'm just wondering when they bid, do they bid all like contract prices on all these other things, or is this like a situation where a bidder, let's not say it's TL Edwards, but let's just say a bidder, bids low on asphalt, but then, has complete flexibility to charge whatever they want on everything else once they've got you locked in. How does this work? How do we keep our supplier
So
tight on their pricing?
There are bidding strategies, and they're not against the law, but there are bidding strategies that some bidders will penny bid a certain item anticipating there won't be a lot of it in order to get their lower bid price in it. And, you know, if there is a lot of that item that, you know, you pay them a penny. But then on some of the other items, they may, you know, they may go double or triple whatever it actually costs them. So there's a lot of different strategies around bidding that companies use. And you do see penny bids, but there is 110, I think, unit bid price items on the contract. So anything and everything you can think of in a roadway, from reflectors, you know, installation to catch basins and all that stuff is included in there in a bid item. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
Well, I guess given that you've got sort of a wide range, how do you pick your winning bidder? I mean, if
It's-
they're penny bidding some
it's-
stuff and gouging on others, I mean, how do you pick?
it's 110 bid items times the unit price, it's an estimated quantity, equals the value, and then it sums up at a bottom line, and that's your low bid. And then they go through a qualification process. Actually, the last time this was bid, the low bidder was, I think it was Aggregate Industries, were thrown out because they had something going on with the Attorney General's office, I think, so.
Yeah. But Brian, we don't choose the winning bidder. It's part of the consortium, right? It's what's the actual choose bidder?
That's right. Yeah, so MAPC is our is who we use. They do the entire contract bidding process. And we're one of 11 communities on the South Shore in our contract. So by pooling our quantities together, we get better pricing.
Yeah.
General concept.
That's super helpful. I was just curious how you picked your provider, and the answer is you don't. Which simplifies
Yeah, no.
things.
Well, I mean, we do meet the 11 communities. We have a regional meeting. We talk over the bids, and
Yeah.
we do a vote. Majority rules.
Got it. Okay, that's helpful. And that really was my last question on this, unless someone asks another one that piques my interest. Does anyone have any other questions? Okay.
Hey, Brian.
Yes.
Brian and Brian.
Which Brian?
Brian and Brian, both Brians. On our agenda, next up, we have the town hall update.
Yeah.
If Brian Joyce can stay on and perhaps answer some questions for us on that, it would be very helpful.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree with that. Before we move on to the next item,
Schools.
well, two things: schools, and also just the appropriation vote on this. This has its own fund. It's not being funded out of capital budget, so this does not in any way need to be prioritized against any of the other departmental requests that we're facing, because it's not drawing on any pool of capital that that anyone else has any access to. So the question is, and I just put this in front of the committee, actually, you know what? We may not be able to vote this. Hold on a second. You know, my question is rhetorical. We can't vote this because the agenda doesn't say discuss and vote.
I would also say we would probably want to wait for the sidewalk committee to make their recommendations anyway, just for a matter of process. Yeah.
For Brian's point earlier, this could be modified. So we've been through this. I think we're ready to go. Absent other changes, we'd have to put it on a future agenda to actually do the vote. But you're right. Two valid reasons to wait. First being it's not legal to vote it. But...
Just for clarification, none of this draws from the capital stabilization fund. The 300,000 we usually apply does not apply here. Is that right, Brian? Okay. Yeah,
that's correct. That's correct. So we will not, the regular capital stabilization fund will not be kicking in 300,000 for roads this year.
Okay.
They've got their own sandbox now.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, do you guys have any questions on the school campuses?
I do.
Same.
again, it's a school, just the schools had asked, you know, about paving the campuses and getting estimates. So I got estimates from Lenny at Teal Edwards, and you know, it's very expensive. There, each campus is up over $1 million, but it's, you know, it's not as easy as doing a mill and overlay down a straight roadway. There's a lot of curbing, a lot of curves, you know, a lot of handwork, and you know, it's all detailed in there. But at any rate, that they're, I think, going to make a vote on whether to proceed or not proceed, and use their stabilization fund potentially to do work if they want to. And I think the idea that we talked about was, you know, we're not going to do both campuses in 1 year, because Rec Camp uses the Deer Hill campus. And if they did decide to go with Deer Hill, then they'd probably do that, move Rec Camp over to that campus, and then the following summer potentially do the high school campus. But again, it's all in play. I was just putting it out to you guys because you're going to see it. You know, you should see it, and you'll probably see it from them as well when you talk to them.
So Brian,
Okay, I'm
is
just
this
back
the-
and forth between the capital spreadsheet that we looked at last week, and then these estimates, and just reconciling the fact that you said both campuses were each over $1 million. On the spreadsheet, the middle high school was not over $1 million. It was just Deer Hill and Osgood.
I think it's only for a small section, right, Brian? The CHMS, is that just connecting to Pond Street?
Mhm.
That's right.
Because it's, yeah.
Well, it's also the entry road. So it's the asphalt road from, I mean, it's got on the spreadsheet, it's the asphalt road from Pond Street needs to be resurfaced. That's 100. I assume that that's the road up towards the gym, and then replace sidewalk and curbing on entry road 250, which I think is the sidewalk that's all chewed up by the field. And then extend sidewalk to Pond Street, 75 grand. So the sidewalk is, as you guys know, doesn't go all the way down to Pond.
Right.
So those
So
were
I'm
the,
not sure what you're looking at. Is that the previous year's capital?
it's not, this is a capital budget spreadsheet that has 3 columns. I don't know if you can see that with my scratchy notes on it, but you know, one column is the capital stabilization fund, one is the school stabilization fund, one is the roads and sidewalks, and these are just items that were in the school stabilization fund.
And it was something that was developed last year, maybe?
No, this is fiscal 25. This is current. Just went over it a week ago. Okay, well, let me just cut to the chase. As you highlighted, these certainly the number for the Osgood and Deer Hill School Road is a big number. It actually kind of shocked me. Can you go into a little bit more detail as to why that's so expensive? I mean, it doesn't, you know, to a casual observer, it doesn't look any more complicated than much of anything else we'd do, and it's not an immensely long stretch of road. It almost looked like they were going to completely demo huge sections of that road, dig out all the sub base, completely recreate the foundation. It just really looked.
Brian, could I just jump backwards one step on that question, which is
Sure.
just, I'd love to get an assessment of the current condition. I drive the road seems okay, but
Yeah.
what are we looking at? I know why all the other roads need repaving. From the engineering perspective, what's going on here?
And which school are we talking about? Which site are we talking about right now?
Deer Hill and Osgood.
So Deer Hill and Osgood. So the quote that you received actually, so I gotta take that. This quote included the additional bus parking that was that is likely probably not going to happen.
I saw that line. Okay.
Right, but that's only going to reduce it by about $50,000 because a lot of the site work for that was not going to be part of this contract. They were just going to come in and do the kind of the base coat, fine grading, base coat, and overlay on that, which is roughly $50,000. So it's still over $1 million. It's like $1,020,000. But you know, to answer your question, a lot of this is kind of excavating out and then reclaiming and doing a full sub base and base course and top course. And you can see the big unit of bid items in there. It's really your binder and top, and then, you know, dense graded crushed stone sub base for, rebuilding kind of the roadways in there. Also, the sidewalks are gonna be done. It does not include curbing in front of the school. We decided to save money to use the existing curbing that's there. Kind of, if you go through the unit bid prices, it really tells the story on, where the price point, the big ticket items are.
But what's the kind of the biggest failure of that whole thing? I mean, obviously, the pavement's not new, but the parking lot in Deer Hill seems to be in pretty good condition. The road to Osgood, it's got some patches, but it's not like Margin Street was, for instance. So what's really the failure of this facility when it comes to the roads and sidewalks here? I mean, is it something that if we push it off, it's going to cost a lot more money? That's kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah, so understand. I mean, it's falling apart, and it's not a candidate for mill and overlay, which is, when your base course is still pretty good, but it's your top course that's failing. This is requiring a full kind of excavation, basically pulverize the entire roadway and start from scratch.
Wow.
That's where we're at. So
Brian, what is it? I mean, so what is it specifically that's caused us to have to go all the way to the sub base on this? I mean, to Corey's point, it's just, and to my point, as a casual observer, it doesn't look like that road has lost its foundation. It's been there a long time.
It's got water and sewer trenches and electrical trenches that have happened since the school campus was done. The assessment, when we started talking about this with the schools, is they were like, let's do this one section, from Pond Street up to, say, the business office area. And then that would just fix that one problem. It would make the rest of the roadway look terrible.
We're not talking about Pond. We're talking about Osgood and Deer Hill right now.
Osgood and Deer Hill, right? So they actually requested the section between the schools, between Deer Hill and Osgood, around that corner.
Right. That seems to be where the majority of the damage is.
So we can do that approach, but we'll be going year after year, fixing sections of the campus rather than doing that. The recommendation was do the campus in its entirety, and then you have a 20-year lifespan on it, as opposed to hitting it year after year, and it's always going to be miserable in some shape, along that drive, and you'll have the disruption year after year doing section by section. So that was kind of the general concept for both school campuses. There are worse areas than others, and I suppose we could shorten up the length. If you get it too short, it becomes a project that TL Edwards would undertake. We'd probably get a smaller paving contractor like Hanbury, and the price points would be higher.
Brian, where do these two projects line up with the consultant's report on the Cohasset roadways, the A, B, C, D, and E priorities?
It wasn't part of that study. Oh, you mean a paving condition index? So it wasn't part of the study, but it would be it'd be moderate to severe on the, as far as.
So are there other areas of town that were not studied and should? Because this is a surprise to me. I thought that the study really was our guide for all paving in town.
So the study focused on public roadways, strictly public roadways, not school campuses, not parking lots, just public roadways, and I'll say not even the private roadways.
No, I understand that. I get, we're not doing the private ways, we're not taking those up, but it just seems like a real omission that if the town is obliged to maintain those roadways, they should have been part of the survey, the study, at least to guide us and the other boards on making choices. And this, to
So-
me, I mean, how does this project line up now with our overall road program?
So there's a delineation, there's a funding delineation between the schools and the town, and there's also kind of a delineation of maintenance of the buildings and of the campuses, and kind of the delineation that was made was, it's not a public roadway, it is part of the campus, and paving and maintenance of, sidewalks should be a school capital item, not a road item. And if you look at the ticket, the ticket price here, if we use the road funds, wouldn't, for the school campus, we wouldn't be able to do any roads this year. So it's,
Mhm.
I think it's a fair delineation to say the campuses are an animal unto themselves. If you want to get an assessment, I mean, we could bring in the same TEC consultant just to do the campuses, and it'd probably be, a few grand. It might be a worthwhile effort, and get a full, PCI index condition assessment of it. But the eyes of the professionals who do it, TL Edwards, and I've seen Rhodes and Carl's, it's all pretty shitty, and it needs to get done. So I don't think they're going to come in and say, this is great, let's just do this one section. I think they say, if you want to do it right, do the entire thing.
So,
No, but the whole
Sure.
point of the survey was to help us understand what our priorities are, according to 5 different levels. Personally,
Right.
I would love to see this included in the TEC report, so that we can compare the needs for the town. Even though the schools are obliged to pay for it, it's still one town, and it's still tax money. And we need to make thoughtful decisions based on good information. And a third-party consultant eliminates any idea that a vendor is actually giving us an
get it.
evaluation, because they may, put a thumb on the scale. I don't know. I mean, that's kind of harsh to say, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, no,
not
totally.
not
So
an independent
transparency and making
guy.
sure it's actually the right thing we want to do. But so let me
Yeah.
do this. I still stand by the delineation between schools and the roads. 'Cause
Mhm.
I
No,
understand, it's all
understand.
coming out of the taxes, but it is I don't think we should commingle funds or have town funds. I mean, road funds going towards school campuses, because of the dimensions and orientation of the work. It's not the same as a linear roadway. It's a lot more expensive. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense, but I'll call TEC tomorrow and see if they can give me an estimate on doing an assessment of the campuses. I don't imagine it'll be crazy money. If it's short money, you could probably just assume it under the engineering budget. But at any rate, I can get that proposal, and we can kick it around.
All right, I would just want to get the backup of the rest of this committee, that this is, a good use of your time and a good use of the town's money for another study, or for an additional study to complete the full survey.
I mean, Mike, I don't think it would teach me anything, right? I mean, the things that are in my head is, obviously the road's not new, right? And obviously we'd love to repave everything, and that's just not the reality we live in. But what I think about the schools is what we talked about last week. If it's in the school fund, there's higher priorities than crack pavement. There just are. I mean, there's a laundry list of higher priority things that I don't think anyone would disagree upon, which is, again, the fire suppression, the fire alarm system, and the roofs. I don't think anyone would say, oh, we have to pave a road before we fix a roof. I mean, I think that's pretty simple. So I can't imagine, and this isn't directly you, sorry, Mike. I can't imagine even if that study says we have to do it now, it would change my prioritization when it comes to this stuff. I mean, and yeah, I know it's done. So I think my question is, well, you know, these are fairly heavily traveled roads. I mean, I don't know how many students are in Osgood, but you know, let's say whatever X hundred. So you've got X hundred of people going through these roads every day. That's busier than a lot of streets in town. So you know, while I struggle with the division of the two things because, as Mike said, they are intermingled, but there's also, to Brian's point, they are different animals. So I'm not quite sure how we square that circle, but I do think that if we're just looking at the school fund, I can't imagine a situation unless the road is literally caving in and we're losing school buses. The other things are going to, when it comes to the building being able to serve students, that's always going to be a higher priority. So that leads me to worry about these never being the priority, right? If there's always something else as a priority, then these never become the priority. And that's also not a comfortable path to be in. So this is why I'm struggling with it. Long way of saying I don't need a study. So
I mean, I'll just share my thoughts in a question for Mr. Joyce, but I mean, certainly hearing from a consultant as to the actual condition of the roads is interesting, but ultimately the rubber meets the road with a bid. In terms of what it should cost. I know when we hired TEC the first time, we basically ignored all their pricing information. Not just our committee, but you as well, Brian Joyce, because your market-based pricing experience is quite different than what they put in their study as an assumption. The other thing I'd agree with is, at least right now, as these special purpose funds are set up, these school roads are not competing with town roads for funding. They're competing with other town priorities, and I do agree. We've got some. We have some non-negotiable top priorities, including the fire alarm system and the roofs, which kind of leads me to my question for you, Brian Joyce, which is, if we had to buy, I don't know, 5 to 7 years, what would you do, or what would you suggest doing with the roads, up there? Because I think as we get into the discussion with the schools, there's going to be a focus on making sure that we have funding available, when it comes time to replace the Osgood school roof first, and the middle high school fire alarm system is going to get funded even before that. Like, that's like literally this cycle, and the Osgood roof could be as early as next cycle. So, their special stabilization fund is going to get eaten up by those things for the next few years, and then we've got some other roofs coming behind that. But I could clearly see a situation where it's going to be at least 3 to 5 years before we can just throw $1 million or $1.5 million at paving the campuses. So if you had to buy 5 years, how would you do it? What would that look like if you had to buy 5 years on these roads before we could actually do the big bang? And to your point, doing it the right way is great, but sometimes you just have to buy time.
Yeah, I mean, right now and you've seen pothole filling up there. You've seen, kind of various concrete pairs. You'll have a brand new concrete panel, and then the sidewalk next to it's crumbling. So it would just be more of the same kind of, I guess, piecemeal patching. Edwards, again, they probably wouldn't come in and do 100 feet of roadway. It's too small to mobilize for it. So we could do, I guess, sections of roadway, look at it again and just look at the very worst, and then get, a local paving contractor, Pilgrim or Hannaberry or one of those, to give a quote on that. And that would buy us time, and it would get rid of, I don't know, pick the worst pothole. It would just make the second worst now the worst, right? So
I guess it really depends on whether or not there's like really one problematic section on each of these campuses, which I can think of one on each, but the question is whether or not there are multiple, or it's really just one really bad stretch between the two schools up at Osgood Deer Hill. And then, you know, one really problematic area right around the drain, right smack in the middle of the, you know, the drive up to the field from Pond Street at the middle high school.
Yeah, I mean, there are multiple, but there are, I guess, the most traveled ways, right? The pickup drop off areas
Yeah.
is pretty much the entirety of the roadway into Osgood. But so I mean, that's what we do. We'd probably just patch the worst sections and keep doing that until we get to a point where,
Or even a short stretch, to the extent there's one short stretch, you know, and then we'll just delay the entire campus until we can do the whole, you know, the whole big bang, you know, have the money to do the whole big bang.
I think, yeah, I think if we were going to go through that effort, I mean, I'm going to ask for this proposal. I mean, if it's only a few grand, I think it might be a worthwhile effort, even for just transparency and third party, you know, expert opinion of this is what you should do. And they can classify it or, you know, major rehabilitation or minor rehabilitation or something in between.
My instinct is there's both. I mean, I think there's a stretch of road up there that's major rehabilitation. I think the overwhelming majority of it is not. And that's kind of why I'm surprised by how big this number got. But that's, again, that's a casual observer with no expertise. So
Brian, can I just ask, is this just a complete pave as is and not change the design up there? Because that's always been a problem, people parking on the grass, people jumping on the curbs. I know we talked about the buses, but another time I think it was brought up, maybe adding some additional parking spaces. Is that included in this bid or?
No, this is strictly paving in kind in its current configuration.
Yeah.
and it's all the parking lots as well. It's not just the access roads.
Right, it's all parking lots, all roads, and all sidewalk surfaces, but not all curbing. Some curbing, but
Susan.
not all the curbing.
Okay.
I think Susan is spot on. I mean, you know, the amount of events that I go to where there's no parking, and again, I think you can double the parking and still not solve the problem. But I do think that there would be a fair amount of people that would say that there's, you know, a missed opportunity to not expand parking if we're going to spend $1 million, right? And not, you know, add parking, you know. So maybe this is something that, to Brian's point, we can buy some time to also think about how we can improve the situation. Because if we burn this money now, there's a lot of use it now. There's, you know, a lot of consequences, including, you know, not taking advantage of a redesign if we could do it.
All valid points. I think talked with several different folks on redesign and that kind of thing. It's just, I think the problem there is getting a consensus on what the redesign is. You know, bus parking, no parking expansion.
Closet does consensus so well. What are you talking about?
Come by,
Leave that there.
yeah.
Okay. Well, Brian Joyce, if to Michael's point, if we can get that study for that independent view for short money, there's value in having it.
Yeah.
I'll defer to Michael, but I don't think anyone would like to see you break the bank to buy the study.
I agree with that. Yeah, I think if it's short money and it's something we can assume in the
Yeah. And then if I could just ask you to, you know, to either use that data or just independently go look at those campuses, perhaps with a slightly different perspective, which is, you know, it's not that we're never going to do it. It's just, this is a really bad time given the size of the, you know, roof requests that are going to come through that special purpose fund over the next decade. If we could buy at least half a decade, how would you do that? And then we'll do it right when we actually have the money to do it right.
If we are going to do the study, Brian Joyce, I would also include those parking lots, because if we should not assume that they're failing without some sort of evaluation on it.
No, I'd ask them the entire campus and delineate, you know, sidewalk stretches, parking lot, roadway, everything.
Right. And if it maybe it is necessary to focus on the roadways that are failing and take care of them. And then as far as parking is concerned, is that the Roads and Sidewalk group that is working on that?
The Roads and Sidewalk Committee are not looking at school campuses or parking at schools.
Is anybody driving decisions on parking or expanding parking? Or is it just, a good thing to do, but no one's really justified it?
It hasn't been a point of emphasis on the sidewalk committee. Basically, they're looking at sidewalk stretches where there isn't sidewalk and fixing sidewalks. So,
Right. And then I do know that adding school bus parking at Deer Hill has impacts to the neighbors. So I would not, for myself, want to assume that those bus parking lots are acceptable to everybody, and unless and until there's a vote of some kind at a town meeting to authorize it. So I would want to temper any proposal with the notion that school bus parking at Deer Hill is not a foregone conclusion. Thank you, Brian.
Okay. Do we have anything else on school paving and parking? All right, let's move on to town hall updates, and want to just be clear that the agenda item, at least as I envisioned it on here, was just simply to make sure that everyone is aware of the various moving pieces that have moved over the course of the past several weeks. I think the last time town hall was on an agenda, the capital budget was at least 2 weeks ago. It was the exact same night that Michelle Leary was taking a list of prospective repairs in front of the select board a little bit later, so our committee did not go through it. And at that point in time, I think One Pleasant was still, kicking around out there as a lease with an option to buy. And a lot has changed since then. So I just, I'm just going to rattle off what I know has happened. And people may interject to the extent that, I'm missing things. But first, the owner of One Pleasant went in front of our planning board and requested and received consent to or permission to turn the building into condominiums. So it's one condominium for the first floor, and then all the condos on the second and third floor are now going to become individual condominiums. And that that certainly changes sort of the nature of the building. It also, as I understand it, means that the lease of the first floor is off the table. I could be wrong about this, but that's at least as I understand it. And Michelle, correct me if I say something incorrect here. And certainly the possibility of leasing or moving in there prior to town meeting is absolutely off the table. So I think a lot of the angst around, jumping in there before, the town jumping its operations in there before taxpayers would have a say on this matter is now sort of an issue of the past. That said, now that the building is turned into condos, there is an option to just not a contractual option, but there is an opportunity to just flat out purchase the first floor for our town hall operations. And I don't know the exact numbers, but it was a little over 3 on the purchase, plus your moving cost brings you up, into the high 3s. And it's my understanding that the select board has that on their agenda tomorrow. I could be wrong, but I don't believe they're voting to necessarily recommend it, but they are going to vote tomorrow as to whether or not to put that opportunity on the warrant. And if they decide that they want it on the warrant, then that would then follow sort of a standard capital request process that would have to come in front of our committee and go in front of advisory, and select board themselves would have to vote on it. And then with regards to 41 Highland, as I mentioned earlier, Michelle had presented a list of potential repairs and modifications to that building. And I've asked her to be prepared to just walk us through that tonight, given, you know, it wasn't really appropriate at our last meeting. The other thing that has happened at 41, well, regarding 41 Highland, is that there is a group of not-for-profits that are actively talking about not only programming, but for all of the auditorium space and any other unoccupied space up there. But, you know, also looking at, you know, at programming the entire building, to the extent that the town administration ended up over at One Pleasant. And I think that's it with regards to the updates. I mean, I can't think of anything else that's happened or oh, I'm sorry. And then also there's a citizen's petition that has been, you know, filed. And I think Michelle circulated that to the group earlier today. And then haven't really had a chance to look at that. You guys got it when I got it. And it at first glance, it just looked like a $1 million first tranche on the most urgent repairs for town hall, assuming that there would be sort of a multiple phase, repair program implemented on the existing town hall. So I think those are all the things that have happened. If anyone knows of anything else that's happened that I missed, please, now would be a good time.
I can speak to that. I attended a meeting with Brian Joyce, Michelle Leary, John Helen, Corey Evans, and who am I missing? One other person.
Clark Brewer.
Clark was there, right? And what we did was we walked through a design that Clark Brewer had developed. More than a design, it was a plan. It was a set of phases for repairs. And I'll use the word rehabilitation in some instances, but generally repairs in order to get the building usable, and in order with the goal of keeping people in 41 Highland Avenue and avoiding going to One Pleasant Street, avoiding relocation costs. In both the proposals that were attached to Michelle's email today, there are a lot of assumptions that drive two wildly different costs. But the citizens petition cost is based on those discussions and review of some of the assumptions with Brian Joyce, with Michelle, and with John Helen. And so I think I just want to urge this committee to find a way to influence our select board and others to take the low cost, stay in place option seriously, so that we may be able to solve our problems for a lot less money and a lot less hassle and upheaval and difficulty for the folks who work in town hall. Let me rephrase that. I feel that the citizens petition proposal is thoughtful and is supportable. However, there are assumptions in there. And when there are assumptions, then you're working with estimates. And that's where you start to go down a rabbit hole. So I just want to add that this new initiative, I think, should be taken seriously and be part of our deliberations or discussions. That's why I asked Brian Joyce if he could stay on, perhaps to speak to some of this. I don't know how far this group wants to go down the rabbit hole tonight, but I feel that we should all be aware that there seems to be a very interesting option that should be considered. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. A few comments and then a suggestion. First, it's a citizens petition, so we don't, as a committee, don't have any choice but to take this seriously, regardless of what anyone may feel intrinsically. It's not something we get to decide in terms of where we spend our time and what level of seriousness and detail we approach a request. It's my understanding that this has enough signatures. It will go to town meeting, and it will follow the exact same capital request process as anything else. So the first thing we're going to need to do on this is actually get a proponent to come present this to us, Michael.
Mhm.
And I know, we had Clark in, 2 weeks ago to give a highlight. It sounds like, if I recall correctly, that was before the meeting that you had. I may be wrong. So it may have evolved a bit. I have not had a chance to really digest the citizens petition, so I don't know if it's evolved. But it's not that there's never been a willingness to hear this. So, I think as soon as whoever the proponent is here is ready to come back and present this to our committee, we're going to need to go through this. And, ultimately, compare this against the other alternatives and make the recommendation that whatever recommendation we feel is optimal. Second thing I'd say is that the devil is going to be in the details with the assumptions. I got a bit of an informal debrief on the meeting that took place at town hall, and it's my understanding it's very easy to start to see things differently in terms of what the scope should be as a starting point, and then sort of what layers of additional cost get layered in, and how you move people around and things of that nature, which I think is what you were alluding to, Michael, and it brings you to different places. So I think it's very important to really look at these. I shouldn't say these because we don't even know what the other option is yet, but look at every option and really truly understand exactly what the assumptions are, how they differ, and why they're yielding different prices. This I think we're also, as a committee, going to need to pay very close attention to where the estimates are coming from and what they really mean. We have seen really significant differences between estimates and bid costs, across a wide range of projects over the years. And I think that's just the nature of the beast. So we have to be cognizant of that, and we have to be cognizant of where our numbers are coming from. Are they from prior bids? Are they first person estimates? In other words, are the proponents on the phone actually the experts giving the estimates, or are they doing what our architects in the past have done, which is they design and then they go to third party firms to do the estimating, right? We've never really had an architect on any of these projects that did the estimates themselves. They've always given the estimates to third parties, people who literally just estimate cost all day, every day. And even they didn't get it right. So I think there's a bunch of things that we're going to need to be cognizant of. But at the highest level, yeah, we have to go through this with diligence and balance. So Michael, as soon as we can get the proponent in, whoever that is, I think that signature on this is Peter, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right, Peter Longley. Oops. Yeah. Yes, you can hear me. Yep.
Yeah. So Peter, I don't know if Clark's involved in this. I don't, to the extent you and Ralph are involved, it would be helpful to know exactly how that is. And we should I think the other members of the committee should at least be cognizant of that. And, let's hear it.
Very good.
Okay.
Okay, sure. My participation began last December, or right after our fall town meeting, where I felt that the 41 Highland Avenue complex needed evaluation. And so I joined with Clark and with Peter to take a look at what could be reasonable and doable. I am not part of the citizens petition group. I ceased my connection with any discussions with them about 2 weeks ago, feeling that, you know, in my role here, I don't want any sense that I'm their advocates. My interest is, as it was last November, to look at 41 Highland Avenue as one important option and what it would really truly take. And I'm grateful actually to both Peter Longley and to Clark for applying their expertise as architects and as they may not be official estimators, but as architects, they do have to estimate, you know, for their clients. And they do have many years of experience in doing estimations on projects. So with all that said, what I will do is reach out to Clark, who's really my main point of contact now, and ask him if he would get back with that that citizens advisory, citizens petition group, and get us scheduled.
Okay.
Or, you know, the other thought would be is and Michelle, if you feel that that's appropriate and you're comfortable, maybe it should come from you. If not, then I'm happy to reach out to Clark.
No, I think it should come from this committee. And it should really be Peter should be the one presenting it, since
Sure.
he's the one that's obviously Clark's can present alongside him, but Peter's the proponent.
Sure. Okay. So I will reach out to Peter, and I'll reach out to
I mean, they're
Clark.
welcome to ham and egg it, but Peter's got to be in the
Yeah.
room.
Yeah. No, he's the first name on the petition.
And Michael, when you speak to them, encourage them to view this as a capital request. In other words, you know, every capital request also has to have a source of funding. So you know, the committee's certainly going to focus on this at some point, but you know, the request starts with where's this money coming from, as does every other option with regards to town hall. So I'm not sure it's unique, but
So
I'm sorry, Clark just joined. I don't know if you want to, if you want me to promote him.
you can promote him. You know, but I want to be completely clear that the agenda was an update. It was not to actually review the citizens petition.
Okay.
no, and with that understood, I think some of the instruction you just gave to me certainly could be going with Clark as well. And he can answer any questions if there are any.
Okay. Was Clark on, Michelle? Did he hear what my comments earlier?
He wasn't on when you were making your comments. He joined just a bit after.
Okay.
Wow.
So now I have to remember what I said. I'm sure it was
Brian,
great at the time, but
Brian, might I suggest rather than doing this on the fly,
I suggest maybe you go back and watch the Zoom, Clark. You know, I was thinking out loud. I can't even begin to reconstruct it. But what I was telling
okay.
people, I think at the high points are certainly that, you know, this is now an official citizens petition. We as a committee, you know, will review this like any other capital request and any other option that we face with regards to town hall, and that, you know, we really are going to need to focus on the details in this in the context of a multi-stage project.
Of course.
So, you know, think of it as a capital request. To the extent you haven't watched us sort of go through capital requests before, Michael can give you some guidance offline without the whole committee doing that. But I think ultimately there's going to be an immense focus on the exact scope. Really, it's going to be a focus on all the things that would drive a discrepancy in cost. And it starts with the scope. it starts with the source of the, costing assumptions that go with that scope. And then, whatever layering there is to get to a total project cost. Are my thoughts, and I would encourage you just to go back and watch the few minutes of the Zoom recording of this meeting, to the extent that I said anything better than that the last time around.
Okay, I will.
Okay. And
And Brian,
Clark, it wasn't our intention to actually go through this proposal today so much as just to, if you look at our agenda, it was really just an update on what's happened with regards to town hall in the past 2 weeks. And, the citizens petition obviously was one of, I don't know, at least a half dozen items, including your planning board meeting that turned this into condos. So a lot of that was really just the focus, was making sure the committee was up to speed on what's happened.
we do need an answer though, Brian. What you said in your thing was source of funding. Typically, I mean, if this is, it says ostensibly for 1 million, but the plan is for 5. If there is a $5 million request in front of us for whatever, we go through a normal process regarding, is it an override? Is it an exclusion? Or how are we paying for it? So that we have to have that discussion, because that would be, if we're spending $5 million on anything, we're going to talk about where the money's coming from. So.
Yeah. And you just peaked actually one other update, Corey, which I forgot to give on the earlier list, which is late last week, there was a Zoom call of the long-term financial planning group. And there was just a discussion about, okay, how would we possibly fund various scenarios? And, I think there's a recognition that, above some threshold, there's just flat out no way to do it, without, some other form of a tax increase. So, if you were looking at the $8.5 million project, you're almost certainly looking at, some form of funding that would require a tax increase. If it's a substantially smaller number, then there may be ways to pull pieces out of different buckets, whether it be free cash, whether it be other available stabilization funds, could be a one-time capital fund, capital tax, as opposed to a recurring. There are different levers you could pull if the number comes in substantially lower. So there were no conclusions made. I think that the general temperament was that let's hear what the not-for-profits come back with before we spend a whole lot more time on funding this, because in one scenario, it could actually no longer be a town obligation. Even a scenario which includes every single repair that that perhaps the folks on the citizens petition are contemplating, because the building's going to exist, the repairs are going to get made. So it's a healthy sort of symbiotic exercise no matter what. So I think that's probably as far as we should go with the citizens petition today. I did ask Michelle to come back and go through the repair costs that went in front of the select board 2 weeks ago. She requested, and we respected that perhaps the select board should hear it first. So that has happened, and this is all public information. So that was circulated, and and Clark and Michael, and I think it's helpful for you guys to hear this, to the extent that Clark, to the extent you want to stick around, because ultimately we're going to be reconciling this spreadsheet against the citizens petition, just to reconcile it and understand the differences in scope and cost. So if everyone's okay, what I'd like to suggest is we now just move this on to what Michelle presented to the select board. Does that make sense, everyone? Okay, cool. Let's do that.
Okay. So I just want to preface this by saying I am not an estimator. I simply pulled these prices off of a bid that was sent out for the last project, the last town hall project. These are actual bid prices that came in.
Okay.
They can fluctuate up or down. And I worked with Brian Joyce, and we've taken some of them down based on pricing and what we now know needs to be done versus what we were going to do in the past. So we can go through line by line. So
So
roofing.
Michelle, just
Michelle,
for clarity, these are straight out of the last town hall project bids received, the $24 million project. These are line items pulled out of those bids. So we could have literally said go, and this would have been the price a year ago.
Not necessarily. So,
Okay.
it all depends on what we're going to do, how we're going to execute it, what time frame we're going to execute it in what phase, if we're going to phase 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, similar to the citizens petition, if we're
Yeah.
going to do it all at once. So there's many different factors that go into this. But I think when Brian and I discussed it, and Brian, I don't want to put words in your mouth, we felt comfortable with this as a valid estimate.
So market
Um,
price at one point in time a year ago.
Yep.
Okay.
So you have your roofing cost, 285.
And that's both sides, Michelle? That's
Yep,
that's
that's
the whole thing?
Yep, that's
Okay.
the entire building.
Okay.
Door frames and hardware, 205. Windows came in at 650. I do want to say this 650 does not include a historic restoration of the historic windows. This would be a replacement window. So it's not glazing and historic restoration. It's a new window.
But it does replace all the historic windows. So this is new windows, full building.
Correct. Yep.
And we're allowed to do that, Michelle? That doesn't run afoul. Okay.
We are allowed to do that. Yep. Plaster patching, 147. Tiling would be ceiling tiles. The ceilings are at $65,000. That's more of your plaster and other fixes that need to happen. Carpeting at 115. That would obviously just be the offices. Painting of the interior and
That's
exterior.
in the annex, Michelle, the 115? Or is that second floor of old as well?
Second floor of old as well. Painting interior and exterior, and there was a question about this. People are saying, well, we already painted the exterior, why would we paint it again? If we're going to start replacing some siding, the thought was to repaint the whole building and freshen it up. The
So
fire
silly question. How often should we be repainting this building? I mean, it's a wood building. It's not like you repaint it once and you're done for a century. Is it 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? I don't even know.
I think 10 years is the ballpark, but
8 to 10.
We went.
But that's
20.
with good wood, right?
We went 20 last time.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah, we
2001.
definitely pushed it 10 years beyond what it should have been last time. How long ago was this done? It was 3-ish years ago?
2018.
2018.
Yeah, so
Wow,
it's
time
5,
flies.
yeah.
6 years ago.
So it
Yeah.
was done previous to that September 2001.
Okay, but we're 6 years into the current coat of paint, so we're in the second half of this paint life cycle anyway. We're not cutting it terribly short.
Yeah, but Brian, you're making choices and decisions on this, which I would encourage you not to do.
You're saying Brian, me?
Yes.
I'm not making any decisions. I just asked somebody what the likely lifetime of a coat of paint is that knows, and I prefaced it by saying I
Then you
don't.
drew a conclusion from the answer, so I'm going to ask you not to do that. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, so fire suppression, $1 million. We have a design cost in here of $75,000. That is something that Brian has been working on. We have the plumbing cost of $450,000, HVAC at 1.3 million,
So
electrical. at
Michelle,
one-
can we slow down? We're rattling off rapid fire now. So the
Oh, sorry, I thought you were following along with this sheet.
well, we are, but I think
We are,
but I think there's probably questions with at least I have questions on each of these line items to
Oh,
understand
okay,
it.
okay.
So the fire suppression, what is that? Is that just fire suppression in new town hall, or is that sorry, new town hall, old town hall, or
historic
is that
town hall.
replacement of the entire system?
So that's the way I understand it. It's historic town hall. It's sprinkling, it's historic town hall. It's updating the fire alarms in both historic and the annex.
Okay. Okay, so that's sprinklers in Old Town Hall plus alarms on both sides.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, and then design phase one. This is just engineering cost for,
Yes. And Brian
is
is looking,
it engineering, architecture, both? What is that?
So I'm getting a proposal for design, basically bid drawings for fire suppression on Old Town Hall, fire alarms, both sides, HVAC, fixing the chiller system out back, and makeup air.
Okay, so this is bid docs, Brian, and the engineering's already been done as part of our last project, or how do you?
No, this is a proposal for new specs and drawings just to do those systems. And doesn't include, the front end documents, which we would put on that.
Okay. And can we reuse, for example, a sprinkler design? I mean, we were gonna sprinkler Old Town Hall in the last go round, right? Is that reusable? Do we have to recreate it?
That was a different layout.
Yeah.
I think there was reconfigured spaces and all that stuff. So basically,
Fair
this is
enough. Yeah, you're right. Okay,
sprinkling as is in its current configuration.
okay.
Are there any other bidding things we have to do for this, Michelle? Just since we're in the design before we spending money phase. To bid this stuff out, any other design stuff that would have to happen? Besides that 75, okay.
so as long as we get those design docs,
So,
And
yeah, so I
doc-
just want to, right, it includes the tech specs and tech drawings. It doesn't include any of the bidding documents on the front end specs, which chapter
Okay.
140 stuff, and
Which-
there's no clerk of the works in that already.
Okay.
Would be submittal reviews and things that the designer would take care of.
Okay, I'm just the 75. I'm just again, I have no basis for judgment on this, but my instincts are telling me that's light. Are we? I guess, Michelle, you put this stuff out to bid all the time, so and you know what it costs to put together bid docs. You guys are comfortable with this?
so the good news is, the front end docs that Brian's talking about, chapter 149, we already have a set. We've paid
Okay.
for them. It's not
Okay.
something that we have to recreate, so we'll reuse those. And those were costly to begin with, but we now can
Yes, they
use
were,
them
which
for-
is part of what's
Yeah.
driving my instincts. So
but we can reuse those.
okay,
Um,
reuse is a good word. I get it now. Thank you. That's all I had on design. Anyone else before we move on to plumbing? Okay. Plumbing. What exactly does that comprise? Is that just old town hall, historic town hall, or is it new bathrooms? What is that?
So it's not new bathrooms. So what this is just some cosmetic repairs to the existing bathrooms. This will add a bathroom to the historic town hall, a standalone bathroom. Or in the event that we wanted to add 2 bathrooms to historic town hall and do nothing else to any of the other bathrooms, that's what this cost is. So there's some concessions we need to make, or decisions we need to make these prices valid, but 450 would get us 2 bathrooms in historic town hall or renovate the bathrooms that we have now in the annex. So,
Okay. And again, I have absolutely no basis for my instincts, but my instincts are saying 450 for a pair of bathrooms is a really big number. What?
it's not. So, I can just use the Milliken Field Shed as an example. We took an existing building, we added a couple of bathrooms to that existing building, and the pricing that we got when we went out to bid was upwards of $400,000. We have since worked with the local vendor to get that pricing down,
Mhm.
but we had that ability. So it all depends, once again, on how we phase this project, right? So if we're just going to take care of the bathrooms, then we may be in a better position than if someone's going to come in and do all the bathrooms, update the plumbing, if we're going to tie this into something else. So I think we just have to figure that piece out.
Okay. All right, we're on to HVAC.
So the HVAC would, it's, this came directly out of the bid documents, so this was an entirely new system. Same with the electrical. It would be a new system. Whether or not we need an entirely new system, if we're just rehabbing, I don't know. I'm not an engineer. But it was the only way to get at these prices.
Okay.
New
so
for
this-
both sides.
Okay,
So maybe not.
so this was for both sides, including, you know, the HVAC and electrical portions of a completely new annex, is that correct? Okay. And on the electrical, Brian, just out of curiosity, is there anything wrong with the electrical in the annex, the existing annex? It's a
The
mini
annex
building. I mean, I'm sure code has changed a bit, but it's not like we moved from knob and tube to modern wire in that
Well,
period.
the annex electrical, the service is fine. There is some old service on the town hall side.
On Old Town Hall side, yeah.
But I guess the part of the discussion is how much of, so the proposal I was getting, again, it's just fire, what needs to happen to be code compliant to stay in the building, which was the fire alarms, fire sprinklers on the old town hall, HVAC, and a new roof, right? The other items that we're talking about here were kind of pulled from the other bids that Michelle got on the last project, and it includes a lot of that last project design. So part of the thing we need to talk about is if you rehab a certain, I forget what it is, 50% of, there's a 50% of the square footage of a building, then you need to bring the entire building up to code. So that's a trigger point we don't want to hit if we're trying to just, you know what I mean?
Oh, I agree.
Fix the systems you just need fixing.
Right.
Lack of
Overtime as needed. Okay, so the bottom line is we don't need to do the electrical system in the existing annex. We would only need to replace the electrical system in the historic town hall, which means it would probably be a substantially lower number than this 1.5. Is that a reasonable thought?
Yeah, and I don't know that it would need, I guess we'd have to look at it. The systems that we're gonna fix, the chiller and, you know, new ERVs to bring makeup air in. If the electrical won't support that, then it would probably require some electrical work.
In the new
Yeah.
in the annex, you're saying?
In the old town hall.
Well, certainly in Old Town Hall, I think everyone's on the same page that we need new electrical pretty much throughout Old Town Hall. Okay, but this number was for not just Old Town Hall, it was for a completely new annex. So it's a big, my point is, this is a bigger scope. This 1.5 is for bigger scope than what we would be implementing if we just went in and fixed what needs fixed.
Yeah, and I think that's fair to say about all these bid items. They were for, you know, they were real bid items for a bigger scope.
Some were for bigger scope, others not so much. Okay,
Can I interject here?
please.
Now that you've gone through the list, I want to talk about, and I will not talk long, but I want to talk about some of the major assumptions, and you've just touched on it, that the items here on the list that Michelle put together for us at 6.3 is based on a much larger project. You just mentioned that. The $1 million that the Citizens Group is projecting is based on the most necessary repairs to the building, to the Old Town Hall, to bring it into code compliance. That includes the roof, it includes windows, it includes work on HVAC, and it includes work on electrical. Now, the assumptions made on the citizens petition
Michael,
is for-
Michael, I'm sorry, I have to stop you. We're not talking about the citizens petition tonight.
Okay, we are talking about.
We're gonna do it in the same level of detail, and then we will compare and contrast the two side by side. But we
Okay,
have to
that's
be
fair.
balanced and diligent on both of these.
Okay, but I don't want to leave people with the impression
Yeah.
that this is a $8.4 million project. You're not comparing this project to a minimal repair, not minimal, I shouldn't say that, a necessary repair to 41 Highland Avenue, both the historic wing and the annex. And so before we go much further in analysis, I agree. And I know Susan is one of our liaisons to the town hall project. I would like to suggest that Susan, myself, meet with Michelle and meet with Brian Joyce and begin to go through the two proposals.
So I would just like to say, I'm open to do that. But the reality is that there's no other way to get pricing unless we go out to bid. We can come up with our best estimates, our best budget numbers. Until we put this on the street, we're not going to have actual numbers. My fear is that no matter what we're talking about, whether we're talking about the citizens petition or these numbers that were pulled off a bid, until we have a scope of exactly what we're going to do, no one's going to hit the target, right? And the way I understand the citizens petition is it's actually $5 million. It's $1 million a year over 5 years.
That's correct.
So 5 million
Well-
versus 6.3 isn't that different in the big scheme of things. But I just want to always emphasize that until we have actual bid prices, no one's pricing is really holding any water.
Right. There's one
And
other point I'd like to make.
I have to say
before we
something, Mike.
go.
I have to say this now, right? We have to get out of the mindset of this, right? You just interrupted Brian, and you kind of, we were talking about this, and you're bringing in a conflict and you're suggesting, or by your mannerisms, you make it seem like these are in conflict with each other. And to Michelle's point, and to Brian's point, where we have to be is in collaboration. Why is this so expensive? Why is the other one cheap? We're only going to do that by listening and talking and hearing everything out. We have to figure out the scope. So, and I mean this sincerely, I think we can get there. We just have to all be on this. We all have to be in a collaborative state of mind. That's the most important thing to get through it. Because the second we start doing this, we're going to go like this, and we're never going to find where we need to be. So we have to be collaborating right now with everything. And when there's stuff that comes up, we're going to hear about why it's expensive. And then we should hear about other ways we can do it cheaper. But we're all on the same team. That's it. There's no two teams here. We're all on the same team to try to figure out what the best option here is, whatever it is. But let's be on the same team through this. I don't want us to be on different teams.
Thank you,
Okay?
Corey.
All right.
Mhm.
Thank you.
So let me circle back to what I said at the outset of this. When we get to the point where we're going to be able to make any recommendation, we're going to have a surgical understanding of three things. Whatever it is that's in front of us, we're going to have a surgical understanding of the scope. We're going to have a surgical understanding of the estimation. And we're going to have a surgical understanding of the gross ups on top of the hard costs that get us to the total project cost. Those are the three levers that are going to drive the difference in a headline price. And so that's what we're going to do. And, tonight I'm just trying to go through this one, which was in front of our select board 2 weeks ago, line by line, to understand it. So I'd like to get back to this list. And perhaps pick up where we left off, which was the electrical. So I just want to be clear, the electrical number in here at 1.5 was for all new electrical in historic town hall, and it was for electrical in a completely new annex. Is that correct? Okay. And
Brian, we
Much
did
larger
take this,
annex too.
we did take this number down.
okay,
The number originally was 2.2 million. We did take this number down based on our conversations with Brian to
Okay.
reflect the 1.5. So that was one of the numbers that was altered.
okay. So so it was a higher number and you've reduced it for the reduced scope. Okay. And just out of curiosity, I mean, you went from 2.2 to 1.5, so you reduced it by roughly a third, right? But the annex in that prior project was more than half the square footage, if I recall correctly. What drove you to take the price down by a third instead of whatever other number?
Right. So I think when we looked at it, we're not rewiring an entirely new building. There are upgrades that are necessary, but we didn't need to add all the costs of wiring and there were a couple, I have it broken down in my notes. I don't have it in front of me, but there was a methodical way to reduce it. And I
Okay.
can share that with you as soon as I,
Okay. So there's a method to the madness.
there is.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. At the appropriate time, we'll just, we're going to need to, again, understand the exact, estimation on this, because that's what's going to drive these headline numbers. And then the exterior improvements, is that sidewalks? Is that what is that, roughly speaking?
So that was a number that was, redoing the walkways.
It's more hardscape than anything else. Is that
Yeah,
fair?
yep,
Okay. So walkways, stairways,
exactly.
things of that nature. Okay.
Mhm.
Not a lot though. 192 doesn't buy you much when it comes to hardscape. Probably doesn't even take away the that one wheelchair ramp we have. Beautiful black steel historic ramp.
Okay. So direct cost of 6.3, and then we've got a project manager in here. What's the math on that? Is it 10%? It looks like
It was just 10%.
10%.
Do we need an OPM if we're phasing it like this? I still don't understand. I know
Yeah.
that it's your time or it's somebody's time, so there's time here, but walk me through
So-
that part.
Yep, so the OPM is triggered at 1.5 million. I had a conversation with Clark, I thought it was a million. It's $1.5 million triggers the OPM. So once again, all in how we phase the project in what we do and how we do it.
So two questions, right? It sounds like you can phase the project to avoid triggering the OPM. It's an option. But if you did that, then who manages the contractors?
So the select board has asked that we budget for a project manager, at least on a temporary basis, maybe for the next 3 years or so, to help us through some of these larger projects, being the recreation project, the town hall project, and the public safety project. So it will be under Brian's guidance that this project manager will work. So it's still going to be Brian. And a project manager for a period of time.
Yeah, and just to answer your question in general, if we were just doing, say, the roof of town hall, we wouldn't have a project manager. We would
Right.
just do facilities, or if we were just doing, replacing a chiller out back, again, not a project manager, but so I guess it
So
depends
basically,
on,
Nick would basically just manage the contractors.
yeah, Nick or I, or and again, if we did a singular system in the building, require a project manager. But if we were doing a comprehensive overhaul of any facility, it's kind of hours wise beyond what we could handle in-house. So it would probably be an independent project manager. And that's kind of where that threshold of 1.5 comes in. And anything you're doing other than paving over 1.5 in a building, it's like, it's someone there full-time with the contractor on a daily basis.
Okay. All right. So maybe not be an OPM at 10%, but we're going to have somebody there, man, and it's going to cost us something, is the bottom line, unless it's small, unless it's discrete system replacements. Okay.
Did we also get an answer on the MGL value of building thing? Did I miss that discussion?
You didn't miss that discussion. I need to follow up on that in the morning.
Okay.
I didn't
Was that
get an
the-
answer.
All right. Yeah, that was the other kind of full stop thing that we ran into.
Yeah. And then contingency is what's driving that number?
So it's really just I
Is
think
it-
it's 15% of the total.
It's not 15, because that would be 900 grand-ish.
12%. It's
12.5.
yeah.
Thank you.
It's,
Okay, I was just curious what your metric is. It's a weird number, so it's 12.5%. Okay. And then relocation cost, that's actually leasing another space somewhere. So
that
that
would be
would,
yeah, that would be leasing another space for a period of 3 years.
including the moves in both directions.
Yes.
Hmm.
Depending, of course, what we do. If we hotel some people, if we lease smaller space,
I'll rent out a few bedrooms.
I'm just questioning, like I just said it out loud. It includes the moves in two directions. At one point, One Pleasant was 200 grand a year. I'm pretty sure the CJ Cushing was roughly a similar number, which would only leave 100 grand for the move costs. Am I missing? Which seems light. Am I missing something?
no, because this is based on, code compliance. So not everyone's moving out. So this is some of the workforce moving out and some hoteling and maybe
Okay.
not leasing a space as large as One Pleasant or CJC, maybe some smaller space.
Yeah.
So that's where that comes from.
Okay, so we're not pulling them completely out for 3 years. All right. Okay. But you're still assuming at 3 years with the majority out at that number, I'm guessing, at 700K. Is that
Nope.
is that fair? Is that what the assumption is? The majority of the staff are out of the building for 3 years?
A majority, yes.
Okay.
But we've been working on plans of desk hoteling, remote work, everything everyone's been asking for is things we're looking at, and that's what's driving this number.
I think the move out of the historic section has been educational. So we'll still learn more about what we need when it comes to when we split up as we go along.
Okay. All right. Well, that's the last item on this spreadsheet. Does anyone have additional questions, thoughts? I've just been pounding through this line by line. I assume if people had, they would have interjected, but I'm just going to ask again at the end.
Yes, just on the point of the Mass General Law kicking in.
Yeah.
A number of these items are not, a number of these items are repairs and therefore are not part of what that Mass General Law requires. And so that needs to be carefully calculated based on the kind of work that it is and whether it applies or not.
Yep. What was it? It was roofing, windows. There's a list. Susan had it up.
It's repairs versus a redo.
Okay, gotcha. Is there any way, the other question, and Michelle, to your point in the very beginning, which is you're not an estimator, these are the best possible estimates of bids that we've had previously. One thing I've said in previous meetings, I don't want to spend a lot of money getting more bids anymore. Like I don't want to do that. So is it possible to get better numbers, to Michael's point, on some of the stuff? I don't want to say without spending money, but spending a minimal amount of money. If there's some places here where we can narrow down and we can, gap $500,000 or $1 million, where would those opportunities be?
Yeah. So I think if you look at it, obviously roofing is an opportunity. Windows, I think that's another opportunity. Flooring, that's an opportunity. So there are some opportunities here where we can ask Nick to reach out to his vendors that he uses for school projects and such to come walk the town hall. The challenge we have with vendors giving quotations is
they're only good for a short amount of time.
And they want to quote work that they're going to get.
Yeah.
We have a reputation of asking for a lot of quotations and we don't award the work. And it's becoming challenging. And every time Nick asks for a quote, the question is this for a budget or are you actually going to do the work? So we don't want to tarnish our relationships with these vendors
Right.
and continuously ask. unless we have a project on the horizon.
We would probably do with fire suppression at least. I think that one's probably one that is going forward almost regardless, but that one's pretty serious.
Some of these are going forward sooner or later, no matter what, but
Yeah.
yeah.
But still, it's not the whole thing, and that's really, yeah, okay.
Okay. Any other questions, thoughts on this particular set of repairs and estimates?
Yeah, just to the earlier point, which is at a certain point we have to, it doesn't matter what the numbers are, but we have to hear where the money's coming from if we do anything, right? So I mean,
Yeah.
we're not there yet, I know.
Yeah.
So but it's just, that's going to be a whole nother bucket.
Yeah, so at some point we're going to need to start to pull in CPC, clearly.
Yeah.
They're not going to be sole, but they're certainly going to be a partner in this. So I suppose we should start to flag this to them that when we discuss it, they're welcome to join, or at least follow. Okay, that's all I've got on town hall. Anything else more broadly on town hall before we move on? Okay, covered all the updates, and we've covered what was presented to the select board 2 weeks ago. We'll move on to an update on capital debt service. Michelle, if you're okay with that. It's next item on the agenda.
Yeah, unfortunately, I
Riveting
don't
is
have,
this. Sorry, I'm gonna bug out. As riveting as capital debt services.
Thank you, Brian.
Glad we could keep you entertained, Mr. Joyce.
Nice.
bye, Brian.
Monday Night Football.
So, as far as the long-term capital debt schedule, so I wasn't able to get an entire picture. I was able to get a few items here that has debt rolling off, obviously, over the next 5 years, but I'm waiting for another piece of the puzzle.
Okay.
Because we're trying to get to that 505 number or somewhere near that number.
Or maybe it's
If-
less, because we do have debt. We do have debt that's not capital debt. So
Right, so I'm trying to get at that. Unfortunately, our accountant is not available and she's not available this
understood.
week.
So it's 8:10. Maybe we defer that to next meeting. That's all I needed to
Okay.
hear.
Okay, all right.
And then in terms of minutes, I think Francine prepared the last 2 sets of minutes, which I don't think we covered in the last meeting, and she's not here to take changes. So I'd suggest we perhaps defer those until she's here able to take comments, because I did have a couple of comments. And I just asked if there are any other items that we need to cover before we wrap.
Can we schedule a meeting for our next meeting?
Sure.
Okay.
It's a good way to end. And I would turn to the team next Monday, next Wednesday. Actually, Michelle, I mean, what we really need to do in our next meeting, I mean, there are 2 things that I can think of right off the top of my head that need to be covered, and they may be separate meetings. We need to get the schools in as soon as they're ready. And frankly, they deserve and probably will need a full meeting just to themselves. And then we need to get the proponents of the citizens petition in to do exactly what we just did with you. And then we can start to reconcile afterwards. But I don't want to sort of cross-reference, first pass on any of the projects that are in front of us. Let's just take each one of them in, understand them, and then we'll start to sort out the comparisons and the reconciliations after we have all the data. But those are the 2 things. So when are schools ready?
So based on their note, it sounds like they're meeting again this week. They should be ready for you next week, but how about I send a note out to both schools and the proponents of the citizens petition, see
Okay.
who's available on Monday. And we'll go from there.
Okay. I'm fine Monday or Wednesday. How about the rest of the team? Susan, Mike, Corey, Ralph? Any conflicts either day?
Monday should be okay for me.
Wednesday as well?
Yes.
Okay. Susan, Corey,
Um,
Ralph?
Monday's good for me, but I'm actually traveling beginning on Wednesday.
So Wednesday's tricky. I know Wednesday's not quite as good for you, Corey, even though you're able to manage it at times. Same this week.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
All right, so
And-
let's try
and
for Monday and let's
let's
throw
shoot
that out to
for
them.
Okay.
Okay. And
Hopefully
6
we get
PM
one-
still
at
works
least-
for everybody?
Yeah, hopefully we can at least get one or the other. But schools is the one we really need to get in as soon as they're ready. They've got a long list, and I feel like we're probably going to have to refine some things with them as we just try to get their sequence to work so that they can get everything done they need to get done with the fund flows over the next couple of years. So.
Okay.
All right, same time, 6 o'clock. Okay, great. With that, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
To a second.
Yeah.
Thank you. We'll do roll call vote. Susan Franklin,
Susan Franklin, aye.
Michael Dick,
Michael Dick, aye.
Corey Evans,
Corey Evans, hi.
Brian Host, aye, and Ralph Dormitzer. You can wave to us. Thanks all. The time is 8:14. We're adjourned. Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.